Welcome everyone to the Planning and Economic Development Policy Committee on November 13th. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and start with the approval of the minutes. So Councilmember Sundberg and Gardner.
I approve.
I approve.
All right, very good. I do as well. Those are approved. And we'll move on to our first item of business, which is the minor text updates to the oil and gas manual. Jeffrey.
Thank you so much, Chair Bergan. Good morning, council members and staff. My name is Jeffrey Moore. I'm with the city as the manager of the Energy and Environment Division. Let me share my screen and I'll get this going. It'll be pretty short. All right, can you see the slides?
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. We'll start with a little bit of background here on the oil and gas manual. It was passed unanimously by City Council in July of 2021. After extensive public outreach, it became Aurora City Code Chapter 135. So that was 3 years ago. We have not made any changes to the Chapter 135 since it was created, but there have been some changes at the state and local level that we're going to incorporate now. We do have a letter of support from the Oil and Gas Advisory Committee for these minor changes. We presented to them back in July of this year. I do want to be explicit to say that two things. One, there's no changes to actual regulations in this update. You'll see that the text updates that we're proposing. The rules and regulations that we have, we believe they're strong, they're working well. We just had our first oil and gas well site that came through the process fully in the oil and gas manual this year. It's been approved now. We think that worked well, and so we're not proposing any changes to the actual regulations. Secondly, these changes do not include what we call the well maintenance and workover easement around plugged wells. That is forthcoming in the future. We're still working with the development community to answer some questions that they asked the last time we met with them. And prepare some documents there for them. So we'll be bringing that back sometime next year. But that will be in the UDO, not in the Oil and Gas Manual, Chapter 135. All right, so let's talk about the changes that we're proposing. And here on the screen is really the biggest part that we're proposing. Since we 2020
Quality Development Community
Commission, COGCC, has their name has been changed, as well as their focus, to the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. And so I see a hand up. Are we seeing slides?
Oh, I see Councilmember Sundberg.
Oh, was that me? I thought it was Andrea with a hand up.
Oh, it looks
that
like
was
a
an
purple
error.
hand.
Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. Just saw it flash on the screen here, so I apologize. So yeah, changing COGCC to ECMC. And while that sounds simple, there's 45 different uses of COGCC in the document. So because it's city code, each one of those has to be called out separately, and the change showed explicitly. So that ends up being quite a long ordinance. I think it's about 35 pages long because we're having to replace whole sections to capture that change. Secondly,
can I ask a question real quick? Why on earth did they need to change the name, causing us to have to do all these text changes?
They changed the name because the legislature changed the focus. So previously they were almost exclusively oil and gas related. They have received some additional authority from the state legislature for deep geothermal, as well as carbon sequestration, which is taking CO2 basically out of the atmosphere and putting it down deep into the earth to keep it there. So they've had some additional responsibilities added to their charge from the state legislature, and that's what necessitated the name change.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Here locally, the Oil and Gas Division, of course, is now the Energy and Environment Division, and the manager, my position name has changed as well. The Planning Department is now the Planning and Business Development Department, and Buckley Air Force Base is now Buckley Space Force Base. So again, we're just literally changing the names each time those are used anywhere in the Chapter 135. There's also some associated definitions in the first section of the chapter referencing these particular items that will be changing as well. Next, we have a couple of clarifications. The first is some approval authority is now going to the planning director instead of my position, the oil and gas manager. The reason for that is when the division was created back in 2020 and I started as the first manager, I was reporting directly to a deputy city manager. At the time, that was Jason Batchelor. He had the most experience in the city with oil and gas matters at that time, and so I reported directly to him. 2 years ago, that we switched, and I began reporting to Janine Rustad, Director of Planning and Business Development, which has been a great change and really have some great support coming out of that decision. But because of that, we're now switching the approval authority for administrative decisions back to the director position in line with
right? And that's by,
departments in the city. So again, we're just trying to be in line with what other departments are doing and not create some type of different structure for the oil and gas org chart. Secondly, we are coordinating the appeals process that's found in 2 of the sections of Chapter 135 with the existing appeals process that was already in the UDO. When we originally created the oil and gas manual, we used the operator agreement as the base. And so there was some explicit language in there about appeals and hearings that we try to transfer over, and we did transfer over to Chapter 135. But afterwards, we realized that there are other processes existing in the UDO. And since this did go into city code, we're simply going to refer to those processes for appeals, again, to line up and bring this in line with other departments in the city. All right, I have 4 specific slides here, and these are text changes. These come from Public Works. These are changes that they've already made in their rules and regulations, and we are simply aligning with the language that they had given to us to make sure that, again, city code, matches up from chapter to chapter. So there's 2 sections here, section 135-4 and 135-34 related to civil plans. And you can see the change there in the current versus the proposed. And again, these are details related to how the entity would apply and set up certain meetings for their reviews. Next, in section 135-4, again, we've got some strikeouts here. What was called the pre-submittal meeting has been changed to pre-acceptance review. And so we've come into that language here and made the changes to bring this in line, again, with what Public Works has already done. Next, again, changing the language of pre-submittal meeting to pre-acceptance review in section 135-34. And then finally, we have what's called the subsurface utility investigation section. This is text that's put onto site plans anytime that there's work underneath the ground. And it comes from CRS. So there's some Colorado Revised Statute requirements and language where this comes from. And you can see here again, these are just minor changes. We changed the words that are struck out there, tracing wire per Aurora water standards, and changed it to electronically traceable by approved electronic methods. So again, these are all very minor wording changes, but since we're doing it, we want to do it all right, get everything all done at one time and not have to come back in the future and change it again. And that's literally it. We would love to move this forward to study session, likely on December 2nd, if we get the notification provision out for that. But we welcome any questions that you have and would ask for your support in moving this forward.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. Any questions from our council members?
No. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Okay. Looks like we do not have any questions.
Very good. Thank you. We'll begin the process of moving it forward to study session.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is the UDO amendments to allow duplexes on motor courts. And who is presenting? Lena?
Good morning, Chair Bergan. This is Brandon Camerata.
Oh, Brandon, sorry.
I'll be presenting. Good morning, committee. This is Brandon Camerata. I'm a manager in the planning department. Today, I have 2 UDO amendments we're bringing forward. They're relating to fence height and duplexes on motor courts. So I'm asking this committee if they support advancing these proposals onto Planning Commission and City Council, and if they'd like me to also schedule a council study session in advance of the council public hearing. So the UDO is the Unified Development Ordinance, is the city's zoning code and subdivision regulations. The zoning regulations describe where uses are permitted in conformance with the comprehensive plan, utilizing the zoning district map. And by uses, I mean residential, commercial, industrial, etc. The UDO also includes design standards. Design standards are things like dimensional requirements, i.e. setbacks, landscaping, parking, etc. So the two amendments I'm bringing to you today are design standards. The first amendment is related to fence height, and the proposal is to change the maximum allowance from 6 feet to 8 feet for residential privacy fences when the fence is a
in different markets.
arterial street. Collectors and arterials are generally higher volume, higher speed streets. This proposal is a reflection of multiple variance requests from residences that are backing streets like Havana, Chambers. The requests have been supported by staff and the Board of Adjustment and have not resulted in adverse results to our knowledge, other than some inconsistencies in fence height along those corridors.
Industries are
Relates to motor courts. Motor courts are groups of currently up to 6 single-family detached homes that share a single driveway. Currently, the code only allows this arrangement for single-family detached homes. This proposal would allow the arrangement to also be allowed for
or consolidating and
up to 8 duplexes as opposed to 6 single-family detached. This proposal is a reflection of an approach to permit more housing options and is not anticipated to have significant adverse impacts beyond those presented with existing allowances. So those are the two kind of unrelated UDO amendments that I'm bringing forward. If there's any questions, I would try to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions, Councilmember Sundberg or Gardner?
Just a brief question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Do we anticipate any stretches to the parking needs with these, with this?
Motor courts do include, if they have over, I believe, 4 units in them, additional parking requirements within. Certainly, motor courts do increase the on-street parking. When you have 6 or potentially 8 units with frontage that might accommodate 2 or 3 on-street parking spaces, that is something that we watch. And I think when we look at these products, which are considered small lots, one of the provisions of when we look at small lots is to have them
rapport
a neighborhood, so we don't have 60 acres where those sort of impacts can be more prevalent and compound on each other. So that's something that we currently have in place, and as these requests become more prevalent, we'll probably take a deeper dive into some of those things. But at this sort of adjustment, we don't anticipate to have significant impact from what we already have.
Thank you.
Okay,
Brandon,
Councilmember Gardner.
if I may, Chair Bergan, Brandon, in the backup, there is a motor court configuration visual.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing that with the council members so that they can
I was-
see?
we've really appreciated.
Good.
Yes,
like,
I can.
Need the visual. Oh, sorry.
Let's see. So this is just a typical sort of approach. This is actually in our code right now. And so it's reflective of the single family detached, but
Again, and the team have reported
arrangement. So you can see the public street would be on the bottom of the screen there. And then you have a shared driveway between 16 and 23 feet wide typically. And
out on, especially this last year.
Facing onto the shared drive. And, for the units that are facing the street, they have sort of a frontage element along the street as well. And, for the larger ones, you can see kind of the representation of additional parking there in the back that's there for the 6 units, but not for the smaller ones.
Brandon, on the driveway, what was the distance? You said 8 or 16 to 24, I think.
So minimums, can be 16 feet of the paved area. And then for the larger ones, I believe 23 feet. And I think some of that's for utilities and things like that.
Okay, but how do these cars on the more narrow one,
More comfortable space and have.
where are they backing out from each other?
It functions a lot like an alley where there would be homes on either side of the alley, and generally the depth there, that's the same depth we would generally have for an alley sort of circumstances where you'd
Okay.
have homes on back sides. And basically the infrequency of access to those positions make it function pretty well. So it's not necessarily like a Walmart parking lot where there's people coming and going at all times. It's pretty manageable historical circumstance.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, just a quick comment, if I may. The private drive, I think it's good, as we've learned in Murphy Creek, that it doesn't continue to another public street so as to be used as a shortcut, creating angst among the neighbors. Just throw that out there.
Good observation. Thank you. Okay, with no further questions, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is the pad-ready commercial concept. And this
Other municipalities we've noticed have
EDC had been looking at for a long time. I'm the sponsor on it, just as a member of the Aurora Economic Development Council, and we talked about this actually last year around this time at the retreat. So I will turn it over to Jacob Cox.
Good morning, council members. I've got Yuri here. We're going to tag team this presentation. I'll pull my PowerPoint here and just kind of to introduce it briefly. You've all heard me in recent months talk about the process improvement initiatives we're doing more broadly in the city. And so this is going to be, how do those initiatives help our commercial industrial developers get projects to the market more quickly? So I'm going to have Yuri start the presentation here. He's going to talk about the ADC mission, and then a little bit about the context of our parks, where we started with kind of our 6 major parks that have been here for the
readiness sort of.
It's really grown, and we've got a list that Yuri's going to talk through. So I'll pull that up. Everybody seeing this okay?
Yes.
All right, Yuri, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Jacob. Thank you, council members, committee members. Good morning. So yeah, as Chair Bergan mentioned, we talked about this amongst our group and have for here and there over the years, but really wanted to kind of drive it home and ensure that we have some just more predictability, certainty, all of those key metrics that the private sector depends on when making decisions and deciding when to relocate and help their future tenants and companies expand and relocate. So y'all know our mission. It's marketing our assets and what we have to companies in a variety of ways, and we really target the industries that we have, a few industries that we are on the cusp of growing. What really has resonated with what Jacob and Laura and everybody at the city has been talking about over the last year, especially, has been the quality development community. If you want to jump to the next slide, Jacob, we had a handful of business parks, for years, if not decades, there that you see on the left-hand side. That's the list that we had, and that's grown in the last 10 years. All of those, additional parks have come into play, right? And that's by no mistake, right? We at the city, I know, have had a lot of back and forth with the private sector, but ultimately we've seeked out and have attracted just organically quality developers, right? Groups like Ambrose and North Point and national firms like Trammell and Hillwood's coming in from Texas. So those are all groups that have recognized the quality, the opportunity in Aurora, and they're all quality developers that we're really excited to help here and be successful here. So that's the list. And what we really try to also do is try to keep our pulse on the trends, in different markets and growth opportunities with what industries are how industries are growing or consolidating, and what's going on in the market to try to take advantage of all that. And so the last piece of all of this is working really closely with the city. And there's been a lot of good rapport and relationship building and just trust. And we've really appreciated a lot of what Jacob and Laura again and the team have reported out on, especially this last year, in trying to help improve processes and get folks to a more comfortable space and have more predictability again and all of that. And so to our conversation with the group last year, a lot of folks, a few other municipalities we've noticed have marketed rapid readiness sort of development opportunities, right? And that's where this all came from, is how can we be more competitive and keep up with market demands. And so Jacob and I have kind of partnered on attempting to create a better path forward, more clarity, more certainty, for anybody that's looking to come in. We have a great process as it is, right, with a pre-application meeting and then hands-on team with the ODA trying to help every step of the way. But things are still complicated and complex, and so we just wanted to lay out how to funnel some of these developments that are there, right? They've been activated between Eros and King Ranch and some other ones coming online. What else can we be doing to create that certainty and create a roadmap that's just clear and concise. And so we're really excited to, these are first steps on making this a formal process. And I think unless there's questions for me, I'll hand it back over to Jacob to talk through how the real work gets done. And he has an example there of a success story that we really want to replicate.
Thanks, Yuri. Yeah, I've got an example there at the end, as Yuri mentioned, that we'll talk about, that's in Majestic Commerce Center that we were able to move through very aggressively in the last year. So kind of starting off this list to jump into the process details here, as you look at those 6 originals, those are well established.
Lay out how to
existing master plans that have been around for 2 decades for the most part. And then as we look at those recently activated, so the context makes a lot of difference here when we look at the process, because some of these are, when I look at Front Range, Chelsea, that was recently annexed. We're working through a master plan, but that one's going to take a little bit longer to get, vertical pad site ready. But our goal here is that we take a context-based approach with our existing process, and we work collaboratively with those developers. As Yuri mentioned, the really important aspect is that I think what we pride ourselves on and what sets us apart from other jurisdictions is that collaboration, that you've got access to myself, other leaders throughout the organization to work through process, to work through problems and issues that arise, and to really carve out a creative approach that's context-based on that project. So each of these 27 that we have listed, and this is not an exhaustive list, there are other ones that are working with Yuri, working with the city to come online and have commercial opportunities around the city. But this gives a good glimpse of the broad context. So I'll kind of jump in, as you've heard from me before, but this is how we approach all projects across the board, whether it's large residential, or commercial industrial development, but relying on guiding master plan documents. So that context-based approach on getting these commercial projects more predictably through the process to meet those market demands, we really need to have that baseline master documentation, particularly in the Northeast area, those guiding master plans, guiding engineering, infrastructure documents, proactive coordination, as I mentioned. The collaborative relationship is critical. You'll see that when I talk about the example project at the end here. The ability to resolve development issues quickly. We need to be able to set up meetings quickly, work through those issues. What we tend to do is take a look at that initial development application for a big project that comes in the door. I'll use PMI, the recent project that was submitted as an example. Once we've laid out those development applications, civil plan timelines, we're proactively carving out 3 weeks down the line a project workshop meeting where we sit down with every staff member that's reviewing those plans and work through those issues so that we can make sure it's a successful resubmittal to get it through the process in 2 to 3 reviews and approved. We don't want those projects languishing. We don't want any projects languishing. So it's really important that we resolve those issues quickly. Pre-application requirement, I do have that as a bullet. That is not a code requirement, but what I imply here is that in order for these commercial projects to get their process effectively, they really need to do the due diligence. And Yuri's really good about bringing those projects to us. Jonathan and Yuri will reach out and we'll schedule those meetings proactively to make sure that we're providing the best transparent due diligence as possible to make sure that it's a smooth process once they do make a formal application. As I mentioned, the comment review workshops are incredibly important. The strategic approach to permitting, and I'll talk a little bit about that with the project example, but what I mean by that is we work a lot with developers to say, okay, if you need your commercial permit at a certain date, let's work backwards from that date and see when can we get a stormwater management permit issued. So we break apart the civils so that we have a separate grading package that follows our water quality requirements, and that can get us potentially to a foundation permit. So we start to work with the contractors on these projects more aggressively with a concurrency around our permitting logistics, meeting our process requirements, and also being mindful of their work in the field, being mindful of the snow schedule, particularly in times like this where we're working through weather patterns. But we always have a strategic approach based on the project context. So in terms of the baseline entitlement criteria we look for, and this is what we've seen over the years in terms of getting commercial projects to the market more quickly and efficiently, is the property must have an approved framework development plan. That's the old nomenclature to the master plan or a master plan. The infrastructure surrounding and supporting the property must be completed and accepted by the city or have the design plans of that surrounding infrastructure in place, basically ready to go for that vertical application. It's a lot more challenging if we don't have those baseline documents and infrastructure around the site accounted for, both entitlement and also ready to go to construction. If you're having to build
I'll hand it back over to Jacob to
having to extend a water line a mile to the site, you need to have those basically ready to go for us to get you to the market as quickly as possible. And if they're not, we'll still work with you predictably, but this is how to get as efficiently as possible to the market. The development proposal must comply with existing zoning regulations and engineering master studies. Where we see projects sometimes get tripped up is the zoning is not met. So we have to go through a rezone process. We have to open up the master plan in order to accommodate a project, and we'll absolutely work with those applicants to accommodate such project. It just takes time. If we have to go through a city council process to do a rezone, it's adding a couple months to that entitlement schedule. So it's really important that we get those baseline, and we work with the master developers collaboratively to make sure those baseline documentations are done ahead of the vertical development coming to the market. And then the property must not have any outstanding unpaid fees or known infrastructure issues. So the review process, and again, this is kind of across all projects, but predictable review times, flexibility, the customized approach to the resolution of issues focused on the mutually beneficial outcomes. So effective communication from the city across all departments and divisions, the environment of partnership. I think that's something we've created. That's something that I know when Yuri's out there working with groups to come to the city, they're talking about the partnership that they have with the city, and that's incredibly important. Yuri and I work really closely together, as do the other leaders around the organization, to try and make these economic projects work. Pre-application meetings, as I mentioned, that's a real talk about the session. Other jurisdictions offer those, but it really does set us apart in terms of the level of detailed documentation you're getting on the front end of a project, and oftentimes those make or break a project in terms of the information we're providing. Pre-submittal checklists, That's something that we've really worked on across the board, across our process. That helps the predictability as it's coming in the door from a development application. We've talked a little bit, moved through very aggressively, and notion of this neighborhood plan, preliminary plat. We're actually going to start working on that with some commercial pilots to try and figure out how we provide that baseline infrastructure ahead of a vertical application. But then the checklist on civil plans, and then obviously building plans meeting code. The electronic submittal plan review process, that's something that we've implemented over the last decade. We're still working through refinements, obviously, as we go, but our process works very well. We have a very sophisticated development application process that goes through civil and building plans, and we're actively updating Amanda right now to help meet the market demands and upgrades to technology. Our plan review process works very well once we've implemented that. Review workshops and project meetings, that's something that we do every day. We meet with major developers and in one-off projects. Those are well established efficiently as possible. And then, as I mentioned, the updated Amanda system is also going to really help in the process across the board. So just a bit of a timeline on how our process works, and this is our baseline process. So this is the example of a project has a master plan before you pursue the development application, which is typically the site plan and the plat in conjunction with that application, civil construction documents, and then the building documents. So our normal process has been built around kind of a 12.5-week development application process, 8-week civil CDs, and 8-week building CDs. So what we do in terms of that context-based approach, if Yuri brings us a user and they really want to get to the market quickly, we're going to take a look at that baseline master documentation, make sure the infrastructure is in line with what they're trying to do, the zoning works, the site plan and plat process. What we try to do is get that through 2 reviews to the administrative or planning commission approval process. Typically with the master plan, we can go administrative, which also helps with timelines. And then we start to work with those developers on making these concurrent within this, and that starts to consolidate that timeline a little bit. So these are not necessarily sequential. This is something that where we'll even break this apart into 2 processes to say, let's do your grading CDs and your civil CDs, and we'll do those as 2 separate processes so we can get you moving on an earthwork mobilization more quickly. And then the building CDs can kind of go concurrently with those overarching civil CDs, and the goal being that from initial submittal, and you'll see this in the example, initial submittal up through full building permitting is we've got a pretty aggressive schedule, where the example I'm going to show you is we got through that entire process for a large project, large commercial project that was moving to the city in less than 5 months. So I'm going to use Majestic Commerce Center as an example. I don't know if Michael's on, but I'm going to walk through Food Bank of the Rockies and kind of how that worked and how what Yuri and I are talking about works in reality. So 1,600-acre master plan industrial park. They've annexed the section over the last decade that's near 470 to add to that. But 11 million square feet of industrial. Major projects recently that we've worked on in Majestic was Shamrock Foods. That's over off 38th and Piccadilly, Subaru, Amazon, and that's Food Bank of the Rockies that I'm going to talk about here. This is just an image of their overarching master plan from 470 over to Tower, retail portion. And what I'm going to talk about is up here in PA 14 off of 38th. Denver jurisdiction is just to the north in Green Valley Ranch. So Food Bank of the Rockies came to us last fall. It was around, I think it was September 2023. They had a hard deadline of needing a permit by April 1st of 2020. Context-based approach with our So, working with Majestic collaboratively, we pulled an all-hands-on-deck meeting with all the development review leadership. Yuri, folks from ADC were there, Food Bank of the Rockies, and we really worked from, okay, your deadline for permit is April 1st. Let's talk to the consultants with Majestic to see what we need to do. The pad, we had an existing master plan, so it met all those parameters I walked through earlier. And basically, we worked through a strategy based on a context approach of we broke apart the infrastructure from an on-site and off-site. So learning kind of their construction schedule and when the interior work needed to be done. So the core and shell aspect is that I think what we build out for an actual CO was a little bit down the line. So that's going to be into next year. So we worked with Majestic to come up with a strategy on an on-site set approach versus an off-site set approach. We're working with the master developer still on the roads surrounding that are a requirement of the site based on their master plan, and then getting Food Bank to the market as quickly as possible possible based on what their needs were, meeting the minimum requirements for fire life safety access, water access, and what we needed to make that project go vertical from a code standpoint. So the initial development application came in late October 2023. We were actually able to get that approved just before Christmas. So just about a 2-month timeline, as I mentioned, on that development application to get to administrative approval. And then concurrently with that, you'll see that we had the drainage submitted late October, just after that first DA. The drainage was actually approved by the end of the year as well, about a 2-month process there. Civils came in, and this is what we typically try to do. We want to get projects to the milestone of approval with technical conditions where we're working towards Mylars before we let those civils move forward. And so this is where we're constantly working collaboratively with the developer and the consultants to get that down to minor issues on the civils, because what the last thing we want to do is have civils tracking towards construction documents and building documents where something might shift in the site plan before it gets approved. If we're tracking that site plan to approval, we know that, okay, nothing's going to move, the foundation's set, we can start to advance this for construction documents. So we started that process around the approval date, and we were able to get approval of the civils in March. The building process started in January, and that you can see how tight that building review process was. This came in, and I want to mention here, none of these timelines were special timelines. This worked within our existing framework for our timeline, and this is before we started to implement some of the pilot timelines that I've talked about in the last year with particularly civil consolidation. But those building reviews took about 3 weeks to get through the building review process, and that enabled us to get everything lined up for full approval by March. So you'll see that first DA late October, March 21st, 2024, we issued that permit, a couple weeks before that April 1st deadline. So this was a highly aggressive schedule. The other thing that we did at this project was we piloted a team-based approach from the review staff that worked on the development application into civils and the sign-offs on the building permit process. So that was something we've talked about with a lot of our commercial developers on more predictability with review staff as well. It's tough for us to do that on every project, but when we can work collaboratively with a group, we can absolutely make that happen. And it did find some efficiencies with this project. So that's our approach here. As Yuri and I are talking about, how do we approach working with the city to come on for the developers? And what we're suggesting here, and this is something we do every day with the commercial development community, is work collaboratively and contextually with the project they've got based on where they're at. So if it's a newer project that's just been annexed, we need to work with those developers to get their master plan up to a point where they can go work towards vertical development. And then our existing parks, this process works very well for the Prologis and Majestics and North Point, Porteos, our developers that have been active in the city for a long time. And our goal is that we get all of the commercial areas to this point that we can work this aggressively through a project. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jacob. Questions from council members Gardner or Sundberg?
No, thank you.
No questions for me either.
Thank you. I have one, or actually
jump in, as you've heard from me before.
What determined you said Food Bank Rockies had a deadline of April 1st for their permit. What determines that deadline? Because I would imagine other companies will have deadlines similar.
Yeah. Council member, that was actually set by them. They were going after some federal funding regarding HUD because it was a food bank project, and so they had some very specific funding deadlines. Yuri might be able to elaborate on that further, but I believe it was based on their funding.
Okay,
yeah,
and
I don't know any more details.
Yeah, how would that? So that prioritized it from their perspective, but ours as well.
Well, so what we did, and this is just an example of, so we didn't change our timelines to accommodate that. What we did is we said, okay, we understand your deadline, and we had a 7-month lead time to kind of understand, okay,
Right.
What do we need to do? And this is where the collaborative relationship between the city, ADC, and the master developer being Majestic, and Majestic did the entitlements to bring that project to the market. That's where we kind of sat down and said, okay, here's how we get, there's no promises, but here's how we get there. We mapped out the project proactively. We said, if you submit your development application by this time, we believe we can get you approved at this date. We can get you into civils. We can get you into building docs. And then they had a lot of work to do to get it to that point. But it was that collaborative relationship in the city saying, we're going to try and get you there, and we're going to do everything we can on our side to make it happen within our existing timelines.
Right. So that you would use that same approach, someone else coming forward and saying, we have this, we're hoping to meet this deadline. You would help them understand what has to happen in order to meet that deadline, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
very good.
the idea here.
The other question I have, and it's more general because obviously these are pad ready, not site ready, but pad ready.
Right.
The infrastructure is pretty much in place, correct?
Correct.
As far as
That's the idea.
utilities, water, electric, gas lines.
Yep.
Okay.
That is
So
the most efficient way to get something to the market vertically, to have everything in place. And that's where this one's a little bit in the gray area, because they did need to build some roads and improve some infrastructure around the site. But we knew that we had a little time, because that's all due before they get a certificate of occupancy. So we have a little flexibility on how we approach that.
okay, so obviously we have a lot of pad ready sites that we can market, that Yuri can market.
Yep.
Looking into the future, when we look at, are we also looking at how else can we get infrastructure ready, basically, for, maybe a larger potential project?
Yeah, that is something that we're actively working on with these developers. And again, we meet the bulk of that list that we showed you. We're meeting with those developers regularly based on the context of where they're at in the process, to say, how do we get you ready for the market, beyond just having the master plan there. And so, yeah, it's oftentimes the infrastructure proactive planning takes some time to work through, especially if it's a recently annexed parcel in the Northeast. We've got to make sure that we've got access to water and roadways, and we're ready for the market. But you're absolutely right. I think the context of an existing park with roads already built, water lines brought to those sites, those are going to be the most effective opportunities for Yuri to go market. And it's going to come down to those individual developers.
Right. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. Very interesting. And Yuri, final words. I know this is really helpful for you as well to market.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. Really appreciate the collaboration with Jacob and everybody else. And I think this is going to really create a good differentiator for us, for the city, to go out and say, look, we've got a handful or more of available ready plots that you can go into, and it also will hopefully motivate others to, like Jacob just said, right, to get everything to that point, and be ready for the tenants as they come in. And just to add on to the time frame for companies, there's a variety of factors, right? Whether it's funding or internal board approvals, or they just need, I'm thinking back to Amazon's first facility in the city. They just needed to be ready for that next holiday season. And so they came in and sat down with ODA and got through everything in a very similar manner as Food Bank, because they, by August 1st, I think it was, needed to doors open, everything flowing, so to get everything shipped out. So it's just based on whatever the company's cycle is and whatever else is going. So we track that all the time. And a lot of times what we also have to work through is vetting how serious those timeframes are, right? Of course, the company's going to come in and say, yeah, we want to be open by January 1st of next year. But then really working backwards, with Jacob and his team, to really ask the right questions to understand, okay, is this reality? Do you have concept plans, sketch plans? Do you know what the site you're looking at and considering, what it has? Really just bringing everything to the table and making people more aware is really half the battle. So yeah, again, really excited to be to have this in place, and we'll continue working on it and improving it, and we'll see what happens.
Great. Thank you so much. Very exciting. We'll go ahead and move on to our next item, which is the retail strategy update. So we have Bob and Andrea.
Yes, good morning, council members, and good morning, committee. Andrea Amanek, Business Development and Redevelopment Manager. Bob Oliva, our Retail and Commercial Supervisor, is with me, and we're going to just give you a brief update on the retail strategy. So we had come to council earlier this year and presented the fact that we wanted to do a strategy. We met with our partners to do that strategy, and we are currently in the writing phase of the strategy. And I will share with you the attachment that was in your, I think this is that it? Yes, that was in your packet. This is the outline for the strategy that we are currently writing. We're starting with an introduction. Of course, the purpose of the study, the retail strategy, is to maximize and optimize retail sales tax generation. And that's going to be both expanding existing businesses as well, retail businesses, as well as looking for new businesses to attract and revitalize existing retail areas. The process that we went through to get all the information is data analysis that we did on, and I will point out that we are doing this entire strategy in-house, it with our small but mighty staff of 3, and that the objectives here then are to be able to get the data. The benefit of doing it in-house as opposed to using a contractor is we know the city best. We're getting to know the exact businesses and operators of retail areas better, and we know what each council member wants to look for within their ward. We know what their priorities are. So in the process, after we did some data collection, we were meeting with each ward council member to get some of their priorities and to get what they've been hearing from their constituents in terms of what priorities within their wards ought to be. We have met with all but 2 of the council members, and I would point out for Council Member Sundberg, yes, we're coming to you, you're right next. So we have been working in each ward. And then
commercial projects to get the process of
members, we talk about the data that we've collected and what they can expect to see in their ward and hear what they have to say. And then we go out and we begin canvassing a representative sample of all the business of the retail businesses within their ward. So this has been the most labor intensive and most difficult part. These are business people who are working every day, and we're coming in and we're asking them questions. We've tried a number of methodologies. This is what takes so long, and why it's been a long time since we've come back to you is we have discovered after lots of trial and error, because we tried surveys, we tried calling, but the most effective methodology just is good old going out to the business and meeting with them and getting the information from them, or letting them know the city is really interested in hearing what they have to say. And so then providing them with questions, a survey, so that we can get their input. So we tried a variety of different ways, and this is where the length of time has really come in. So once we get that, we also do physical drive outs of each retail
due diligence as possible
ward. Also, so there's a lot of observation, and we're looking at the infrastructure and just how the look and the feel of each shopping center. And then we write up our findings. And as I indicated, when we started this process in 2023, we came with a list of about 8 retail strategies, which we thought would be big, wide, overall strategies for retail within the city of Aurora. So I have those here, and I can, just to remind the committee, I can pull those up. And I'm I'm not having it as a slide, I'm just showing you the slide. Here's the list of the 8 strategies for refresher. Attracting high volume retailers, encouraging operators to expand, increasing sales tax among our existing merchants, providing a welcoming environment specifically for small businesses, retail businesses, filling vacant retail space with traditional and non-traditional uses, even suggesting redevelopment of underperforming retail space, and providing incentives to renovate shopping centers and coordinating with our partners in planning public works and traffic on retail trends so that we can have a better strategy overall when we work with our partners in developments. For example, making sure that we retain commercial areas where new retail can get built. Is a policy area. So how do we effectively communicate
A certain date. Let's work backwards from that date.
our partners to get retail to actually come in and attract and build new, et cetera. So I'll go back to the our outline. And so once we do that and we do the overall observations and interviews and things like that, then we are looking at those overall strategies, and we are crafting strategies for each ward. Now, many of them will overlap, but we are tailoring them. So I will give an example for Councilmember Bergan, Ward 6. One of the strategies that is really important is there are a lot of major players so large retail, professionally managed shopping centers in Ward 6. And one of the strategies that we particularly feel is important in Ward 6 is making sure that we have relationships with all of those operators and owners to make sure that we are kept abreast of what problems they're having and how we can help them, as well as new information that's coming in about retailers that are leaving and what the centers who have their own leasing agents basically have as a plan to do that. So that's just an example of the implementation of strategies specific to the individual wards. So then you see that that analysis that we're doing, and we will identify strategies that will take citywide, because there are some things that every ward needs. And it's relative, we can have that as a strategy, but its relative importance in individual wards, we may want to focus on that strategy in Ward 3 or something like that. So, and we will review the wards in order. What I will tell you is that we are pretty much finished with 4 of the 6 wards. Ward 2 to be done, and we've done all the
working through weather patterns.
In Ward 1. Ward 1 is very interesting because of its geography. It has a lot of smaller operators, so the strategies are very different than, say, the strategies for Ward 6, where we have a lot of big operators, right? And so writing those up takes a little bit of time. So we are mostly done, and then we will go back and review the strategy. We are looking at having a rough draft for internal review towards the end of December. Then what we would do is, after we've had internal review of that, we would bring it draft to PED probably in January or February to discuss that strategy and get your input, and then a formal adoption if the council has changes or whatever, make those and then present it to
Baseline entitlement criteria we look for
adoption as an official strategy. So, Bob, do you have any questions, or Bob, do you have any additional comments?
No, you covered it well, and I'll be talking on the sales tax thing in a minute. So if anyone has any questions, they could ask me at the end if they're specific to me.
Andrea, I just wanted to make a comment since I went through the process with you and Bob and the team. And it's very interesting. So I know Councilmember Sundberg, you'll look forward to this, but just understanding the market in terms of whether you have shopping centers, small retail strips, because I have obviously Southlands, but I also have some smaller retail strips. And those were actually kind of challenging, I think, for staff to be able to connect with whoever owns it, or the leasing agent, the broker, I don't know, all those people that are involved and trying to understand, okay, you've got vacant spaces and they're just sitting there sometimes for years or months. And how do we have that connection with whoever's in charge to find out what's the challenge? Why is it vacant? What can we do to activate it from that perspective? So I appreciated the process. I think going forward, I guess what I'm looking for going forward is, okay, now we have all this data collection, and how do we stay in touch with those connections that we made, and know if something comes up, how do we connect, let's say, an idea with that person? Like, do we have the bandwidth within staff to do that for 6 different wards and city overall?
So,
it's a lot.
The next steps after we approve this will be to talk about specific programming initiatives, right? And to talk about policies and strategies with council, and if there are additional resources that council wants to put towards doing that, and of the strategies, when you hear what they are, what's going to be most important for council in terms of that. So what I can tell you is, and Laura, if you want to jump in, feel free, but sometimes, when we're doing this, and Bob has done Bob has said this in a number of presentations that he's made, sometimes there's nothing we can do. So let's take the Gartrell Shopping Center, where Achieve Sports is in the old Safeway, right?
Around the site, accounted.
It's nothing. The owner of that space didn't want to participate. So owner participation is key to most of these strategies, but knowing who the owners are, and the canvassing has been really good for that. Getting in touch with those specific owners, and we can, now that we know who to contact, we can always try to contact and continue to work this. I don't know how to answer whether we have enough resources today. I can bet it depends on what council wants to focus on, I think, and the strategies that we can do. And we can certainly, I think we plan for 2025 to be the year we focus on, okay, now we know what needs to be done. How do we want to divvy up resources?
Right. And I want to make the point that, because a lot of constituents think that we can just magically bring business in. Yes. And it's, to try to have them understand, it's private business, and they certainly have their own, their own priorities, their own strategy, and so forth. So we can assist, and we can identify gaps, but we don't make the market happen. We can kind of supplements and assist. But a lot of times, and I know other council members hear this all the time from constituents, which is, why don't you bring me bring us a Whole Foods, bring us this, bring us that. And it's not really on us to do it. It is the market.
Thank you, council member. That is absolutely correct. So, and it's very much appreciated. We will try and educate your wards to the extent you will allow us to. So thank you.
You're welcome. I see Councilmember Gardner has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So in the presentation, one of the bullet points you had was non-traditional retail, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. And I know I've kind of harped on this several times in the past, but retail is obviously different than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. A lot more and more it's service-based, rather than like I go to a store and buy something. Personally, I haven't been to a store to buy something and couldn't tell you how long. And so, I appreciate the effort of focusing on retail, but I'm just curious, and maybe this will be part of the presentation that's going to be given to council in January, I think you said. But what is the strategy to, what methods will you use to target that non-traditional retail? Because going back to the same stuff that's always been there, we're going to keep having the same vacancies and the same type of issues. So what is that strategy to get that non-traditional retail?
Bob, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how things like entertainment or some of the things that you've talked about in terms of how the evolving nature of businesses may play into this.
Right. A good example of that would be the deal that we had done with Bolero. So entertainment complexes have been sort of evolving over time. You would say Dave and Buster's sort of hit a mark for a while, about 10 to 15 years, but they have and bowling has kind of come and gone. Bolero went out and bought all of the bowling companies you've ever heard of and brought them under one roof. And that included things like Brunswick Zone, which was also an entertainment complex, not just bowling alleys. So going after someone like Bolero is a non-traditional retailer because they're not really selling a product, they're really selling entertainment. And so working with someone like Bolero was very different than working with anyone else we ever dealt with, because building a store is very different than building an entertainment complex. But the non-traditional retailers also run in the same groups as the traditional ones do. They just don't look like traditional retailers. So, not that I want to, La Plaza would be an example of a very non-traditional retail way of doing business. But there are also things like incubation markets or different types of uses that can go into boxes. And, the one that's getting kicked around a lot is pickleball. Well, pickleball is more of a recreation, not really a retailer, but it's someone who occupies big, large spaces. And we're still taking a look at whether or not that's a long-term play or whether that's a play that we're competing with our own Parks and Recreation Department.
We work with the master developers, collaborate.
All of these very unique. Punchbowl Social was another example of something kind of coming out of left field about 7 years ago and really changing that business. It's a non-traditional player. We don't have to chase them any differently than we chase all the retailers. They all are contacted in the same way. Pick up the phone and call them. Try to get meetings with them at ICSA. When they're in town here, try to get meetings with them and the developer and or the landlords. So it's really just putting the people together. The non-traditional players, in some cases, don't produce sales tax. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they operate under strange hours. And so sometimes there could be some zoning issues or some interaction with other players in the shopping center issues, especially if they produce a lot of parking issues, like gymnasiums, like gyms have parking issues.
Yeah. So, I appreciate, and I understand that not all non-traditional may not produce sales tax, but an empty storefront doesn't produce sales tax either, right?
Oh yeah.
And so I guess more what I'm concerned. So I hear like we're chasing the, I guess more what I'm concerned about, and I want to make sure is in the presentation that we get in January and in the final product, because since I'm not a ward council member, I'm assuming I'm not getting a meeting, which is fine. I don't need one. But this is my time to give my feedback. So I think it needs to be a core part of our strategy, both when we're talking about existing strip malls, shopping, because a lot of the examples you gave are large footprint. They're not going to fit in, a small strip mall that's at the corner of whatever. They have very specific sites that are going to work for them. So it needs to be both a strategy for existing strip malls, but then also going forward, when we're developing new parts of the city, I think we need to make sure that it's a conscious choice of the city to design our retail areas for what retail is going to look like 10, 15, 20 years in the future as best we can. We don't have a crystal ball, right? But as best we can, we need to design those with that in mind, not with what things looked like 10 or 20 years ago, because what we're going to end up having is a bunch of empty strip malls again. And I think, partnering with the development community, because I've heard a lot of really great ideas from developers in terms of like what retail could look like or how it could look different, or spacing and parking and addressing a lot of things that you're talking about. And so I want to just make sure that that's
focused on the mutually beneficial outcomes. So
forward, because we do need retail. We're sales tax based, but we need to make sure that we have that retail filled, because empty storefronts don't generate sales tax either. So that's, I think, my feedback.
Okay. And
Thank you very much.
We are addressing that in the strategy too, to make sure that we have, not only we have the weapons to use, but we have them armed with ammunition. So that's the second half of the strategy that we'll be going over when we finally do the strategy.
Great. All right. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next part B of retail update. Go ahead, Bob.
All right. Let me see if I can pull off the sharing part. Share a screen. Share that screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. We're going to be doing the third quarter retail sales tax generation report ending September 30th of 2024. And we're doing these quarterly now, so things change. They don't change as quickly as they did when we were doing these annually. So let's go through it. Let's see. How do I? Okay. So this is the overall sales tax generation for retail businesses. This isn't all the tax that we generate. It's just the retail sales tax. And as you can see, we've actually had a pretty good run. So just to give you an idea of what you're looking at, the one that's highlighted is the third quarter. Each one of these is the third quarter of 24 as versus the third quarter of 23, not the quarter just before it. So we have had a pretty good run, and we've jumped actually 4.5%. We were kind of surprised by that. We thought we were only going to go up by about 2 or 3%. So that's very good news. So let's get into what's going on in the individual stores. Now, discount stores took a little bit of a drop, and I only have about 15 minutes to go through this, so I'm going to skip discount stores and deal with that when we get to apparel. Okay, home improvement. What a chart. Look at home improvement, been climbing for the third quarter is a very good quarter for home improvement. And what home improvement and garden going up 4.3% has a little bit to do with the housing market. It is true that the housing market is still soft, but some people, when interest rates hit 6%, not interest rates, but mortgages hit 6.0, briefly, people started thinking, oh, we might want to put our houses on the market, and they started fixing them up. At least 3 houses on my block are being completely gutted and fixed up at the moment. And it just seems to be that they're getting ready for when the market comes back and they want to put their house on the market. There's also, when after someone purchases a home, they're also going to be fixing it up, and the market has come up a little bit. And thanks for signing this morning, giving us a much more elaborate update. I'm not in residential, but we do follow what's going on in residential. Okay, so that's what's going on in home improvement. Another good quarter for them, and we expect that to continue. And if the housing market comes back, we expect this to be a boom for them. All right, auto dealers and parts. This is a tale of two stories. The auto dealers are not selling very many cars. Coming out of COVID, people were paying $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 over list price, and the auto manufacturer decided to add that to the price. So now a decent pickup truck could be $100,000. It was about $65,000 4 years ago. And so that has put a halt to most auto dealers' sales, and EVs are not really working right now. That's an infrastructure issue. And so right now, sales at dealers are not going well, but that always means the parts department and the service department are doing great. Because if you're not buying new cars, you're keeping your old car longer, and you're having to service it, and you're having to get parts. Now, the parts are also showing up in AutoZone and Pep Boys and all of the auto parts guys, and on the service guys like Christian Brothers. So that's where we're getting the bump up for the auto dealers and parts. It's not the cars, it's the rest of it. Okay, so next we have electronics and computers. Now, electronics stores have actually expanded into things like durable goods, like refrigerators, TVs, dishwashers, things like that. They're not dishwashers, washer dryers. They've gotten into all kinds of businesses. So it's not just pure electronics anymore. And those durable goods have taken a hit, 8.8% down this quarter over last quarter. And you can see last time it was 14% down. And so this has a little bit to do with all the money that was spent on electronics and computers during COVID. And we saw a huge spike. If you look back, you see the purple colors, huge spike during COVID, and you don't need to purchase these things that often. Computers also don't have the same life cycle as they used to. Phones, when they first came out, you had to get a new phone every time because they always had some great new feature like a camera. But now new phones don't have that many features, and you don't need to upgrade them as often. And computers are sending most of their information to the cloud, so their hard drives aren't filling up so fast, so you don't have to upgrade your computer so often. So that cycle is lengthening, and that sort of hurts the electronics and the computer folks. That is going to change, though, when artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, and video streaming continue to drive the need for much more significant computers. Okay, grocery stores. So grocery stores are still doing quite well. If you look at their chart, this is one of the best charts we have. Every quarter since we've started looking at these guys, they've been up. And so, but they've rounded off. So what we saw in the previous quarters was them picking up the alcohol and beer and wine sales. And they're still doing that. You'll see that in a minute. But it is kind of rounding off what's going on with the grocery stores. But it's not that their sales are up so much, it's what they're selling. So the last time you've been in a renovated grocery store or a newer grocery store, you don't see 2 aisles of hard goods, you see 6 aisles of hard goods. And a hard good is something you don't put in your mouth and you eat. So when you go to Walmart, there's the food section and then there's the rest of the place. Those are all hard goods and they're all taxable. It turns out that food is not taxable unless it's a prepared food. So most of what someone like King Super sells, we don't tax, only a bit of it, like 15, 20% of it. But if they add 6 aisles of hard goods, we're taxing that. And so a lot of the increases we're seeing is for them adding more and more hard goods that we can get sales tax on. Now, you could say we're just taking that sales tax from Walmart and transferring over to King Super, but that's why you see this showing up in the grocery stores. So that's what's going on in the grocery business. And we expect there to be no change. We expect this just to keep climbing. Clothing and clothing accessories. Okay, they took a dip. And normally, if you look back on years, this is a good time of year for them. This is back to school. Except back to school this year was a bust because it stayed 90 degrees till about a week before Halloween. And so back to school usually means chilly weather, long sleeves.
Over the last decade.
Just a new look. And that didn't happen very well this particular year. So we're hoping that'll pick back up. Halloween was a pretty good season, but this is what's going on in apparel. On the second half of apparel, the fast fashion business is starting to slow down significantly. The folks that buy fast fashion are starting to realize that they're basically adding to the landfills. If you buy an outfit, you wear it once or twice and throw it away, and then buy another one. That's not necessarily good for the environment. So people are starting to pull back on the fast fashion business, and that's hurting H&M, Zara, Forever 21, Mango, and a company called Shein. Now, you may know the company Shein, but you might not have known that they control 50% of the fast fashion market. So they're all getting hit right now. And again, we have this pending theoretical recession we might be going into that people are afraid of. So people are pulling back on spending in general. So all of that contributes to what's going on in clothing and clothing accessories. Beer, wine, and liquor stores. Okay, 2.9% increase over last year. And generally speaking, these guys have been doing pretty well. But then again, this is just a switch from the beer and wine that used to be sold in liquor stores to the beer and wine that's now sold in grocery stores, and they're selling more of it. And so we are picking up a little bit more sales, but this doesn't bode well for the small
application process that goes through.
That's what's going on in sales tax generation, but that's also something that worries us about the kind of stores that go into the smaller strip centers. Liquor stores are usually very popular in small strip centers, and they could be fading. Okay, department stores. Department stores are really not getting any better. There's almost no reason for you to go to a department store these days. When they demalled the mall business, they de-department the department stores. So department stores used to be like 10 stores in one. And then the business decided to put those 10 stores in 10 individual stores in a power center. So the bottom line is, when is the last time you said, I have to go to a department store? Not that I want to go strolling through a department store, but I must go to a department store. And the answer is, that's not very often anymore. You can go laser beam that store by going directly to a store that sells just that one item that you need. So don't see this changing unless department stores change their business model. And I haven't seen very many new business models in the department store, so in business. So we expect this to
plan review process works very well.
And we need to be looking to backfill if we start losing more department stores.
They need to open a bar within the department store.
They do that in the more upscale ones. I'm pretty sure Bergdorf has a bar, and so does some of those other,
Nordstrom.
Yes, Nordstrom, and I'm trying to think of one of the international players does that too. So very nice idea. So sporting goods, hobby, books, and music. Sporting goods has been taking a hit in the last few years because everybody bought sporting goods like crazy during COVID. So look at the purple lines, look at their increases. Those kind of increases never happen all by themselves. That was COVID. Well, when you buy all those sporting goods, you already own those sporting goods. And if those sporting goods were like larger sporting goods, like campers, boats, trailers, dirt bikes, quad runners, all of those things, they last a long time. And it turns out that a whole lot of people didn't really want to go camping and didn't really want to go riding their bikes. They just bought them during COVID. So that overhang is now really hurting the sporting goods business. The bike business is in the tank. The trailer business, the camping business is in the tank, and that's really hurting them. In this case, though, we're also talking about hobby, books, and music. And when you add all of that together, we're thinking that this little uptick has something to do with back to school, because you might not have had to buy more apparel for back to school, but if your kid's going after the team, they need all
efficiently as possible. And then, as I mentioned,
and that could be boosting the sporting goods business. And in many cases, you have to go try it on, or you have to go to the store itself instead of ordering it online. And so that's helped. This
updated demand system is also going to
help them a little bit this year. That wasn't helping them 2 years ago. All right, so let's go to a dismal chart.
Really helped in the process.
And home furnishings, and as you can see, they have been nosediving since COVID. So during COVID, this was a durable good. Everyone else spent money on furniture. They were buying houses. They were refurnishing. And then it stopped. And when the music stopped, the purchasing stopped. So we're down 18.2% in this section. And the difficulty there is this is
just a bit of a timeline on how our process.
So if the housing market starts to pick up again, if interest rates drop again, I mean, it dropped to 6, but then it bounced back up again because of the bond market. So the interest rates have to get at 6 or below before people really start to react to it, in my opinion. So furniture and home furnishings, we don't expect that to be popping anytime real soon. And then the last one is my favorite: bars, restaurants, eating and drinking establishments. So this is surprising, because when you take a look at this, you would think the restaurants and the bars have been doing great for the last 4 years. They haven't been doing great, but they have been doing great increases off of the COVID years when many of them were either closed or at half operation. So they're ramping back up, but the sales increases are really happening with the national players. So let's talk a little bit about the kind of stuff we talked about 2 quarters ago. In the spring, I said that the national players were all going to start being promotional. They're going to start advertising. They're going to start giving you deals to get you back into the restaurants. And so I'll give you 2 examples of very successful ones. Chili's decided to do a thing called the Chili's Big Masher Meal, which was a large burger, bottomless chips, and bottomless soda for $10.99. You can't go to Five Guys and get that for $10.99. And they don't compete directly with Five Guys.
Junction with that application, civil
QSR folks, which Five Guys is QSR. They were basically saying, we know QSR was doing well. We're right above QSR. Let's see if we can get the price point that they have in our restaurants. So they did that. Promotion. Then they did a triple dipper promotion where they had 3 appetizers for $20. That was one of the best promotions they've done in years. It actually increased their sales. 11% of their sales that month were the triple dipper appetizers. That was one of their best promotions. But then they beat that by doing this Witch's Brew margaritas. Now, Chili's have been around for 50 years. They've been selling margaritas for 50 years. They do promotions on them all the time. This Witch's Brew margarita in October was the #1. They sold more margaritas than they've ever sold ever in Chili's in 1 month, for 1 month. This drove Chili's sales up 70% in 1 year, from last year to this year. 70%. Huge. McDonald's tried to do the same thing, and they did pretty well with the $5 meal plan. And then they backed up the $5 meal plan with Grimace's birthday. And who knew that characters at McDonald's had birthdays? But apparently, Grimace's birthday added 10% sales to the bottom line for McDonald's. So now they have like probably 10 characters. So you're probably going to see everybody having birthdays pretty soon, because this one even surprised them. They thought the $5 meal was going to do well. They didn't really think that the Grimace birthday was going to be huge. And then, of course, they had that little listeria issue. So that's going to kind of hurt them for a little bit. But that's what's going on in the restaurant and bar business. We have the nationals that are getting promotional. That's probably hurting the locals who can't drop their prices that much and aren't really in the business of just bringing people in the door without making money off of them because
want to get to the market quickly. We're going to
do, and they're all over the place. So if you go to one Chili's, you might go to another Chili's in another town, as opposed to the mom and pops don't really have that economies of scale to do that kind of advertising. So anyway, that's what's going on in the restaurant business. And that's pretty much it. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Bob. Questions, Councilmember Gardner or Sundberg?
I might have a question or a point or two. When you go back to that first slide, or you go back to the books and the hobby, that slight increase you see, I wonder if that's representing a flat sales trend, and more of an inflation. You're seeing inflation, the tax increase because of inflation.
That could be. You're right. Inflation could have added to the price, and therefore they're not selling more units. They're simply getting more money for each unit. And the sporting goods business has been tricky because, again, a lot of people have went out and bought a lot of this stuff and now are sitting on it. But the sporting goods business is pretty resilient. People don't stop playing sports. And every time a new sport comes out, like pickleball, that adds another 5% of their sales when people start coming in for that. And then, of course, they buy other things. Sporting goods took a hit over the last few years, and we're glad they're leveling off now and coming back.
My dad always said, misery loves company, but it doesn't pay the bills. And I've been talking to a lot of locally owned bars and grills, and they're down. We're down. Even Texas Roadhouse is down 15%. So
with the master plan, we can go administrative, which all.
Yeah, they haven't been very promotional, Texas Roadhouse. They were doing great during the recession for some reason, but they're not very promotional, and they do have a high ticket item.
So I wonder if we've been in a recession. We talk about this looming recession. It feels like we're in one. Home improvement companies, small or medium size, are looking for business. They're looking for work. Yep. So it's an interesting economy out there. And I think people have less disposable income because of inflation, and it's something weird's happening.
Yeah,
there's the vicissitudes of business, and I think we're riding a low point right now.
I think you are correct to some extent. We are at a turning point. Hopefully, this soft landing that we were having was supposed to then start to take off again. I think right now we're sort of at kind of question marks on exactly what the next 12 months are going to look like. But we are poised for a rebound. Usually when you take a dip like this, it's sort of a coiled spring that is waiting for the ability to spring again. So I think people are willing to spend money when they feel better about the future. And I think right now people are just a little confused as what the future holds. And during the election period, there was a lot of screaming that recession, bad business. And so in a lot of cases, people were listening to politicians trying to get elected as opposed to what was really going on. We are not really in a bad economy, but there is part of our economy that's doing poorly. And those are
I hate to interrupt, but we're approaching 9:55 right now, and we've got the housing UDO update. So unless there's a pressing question, we'll move on. Thank you, Bob. Always fascinating. So housing UDO, Janine or Steve?
That would be Steve today. Good morning,
Hi,
council members. Planning supervisor here with Planning and Business Services. Just real quick for time, wanted to update you all. You heard from Brandon this morning on the duplex on motor courts. That's one change that's going through. We've also been working internally on some of the state legislation requirements that we have. We've had several internal meetings on those. The big item that we did have, though, was this parking roundtable with our development community, our home builders association, realtors, things like that. And, parking's obviously a big issue for them. It's a big issue for us. But we were able to talk about some of the uniqueness with multifamily and parking, some of the issues with single family. What do we want to count for spaces? Are garages always needed? Are there other options available? Carports, parking pads, things like that. And one of the next steps we're going to look at is we will be bringing on a consultant, because as you all know, once you start shrinking lots a lot, then where do people park and where do the guests park and things like that. And we want to be cognizant and have that balance between good development and but also having good communities as well. So that'll be one thing that'll be kicking off after the first of the year. And then we also have some research we're doing with some other communities. There's some creative kind of financing tools and policies that we're going to be looking at as it relates to parking as well to help us out. So that's kind of where we're at. And any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Councilmember Sundberg or Gardner?
No questions.
Just
no questions.
Okay. You said that you're going to be doing the parking discussion. What else is on the horizon? Because I know there's more with small lots.
Is we got through that entire process for
that's not coming to mind.
Yeah, small lots are getting ready to ramp up here, probably right after the holidays, because obviously that's a big issue. There are some same thing with design standards that'll be incorporated as well. And so yeah, we're focused on the parking right now. We're focused on the state legislation in this next little chunk, if you will. Yeah.
Okay. And then timeline, I know that's very important to developers and in how we're approaching these different needs. Are we looking at having the UDO come forward the changes or second quarter?
Yeah, no, yeah, they're going to be staggered or stacked, if you will. So we're not going to wait and bring you, every change at once, like Brandon did this morning. So as we develop these and create these and have these ready, you'll start seeing them. And so I would expect to see some probably, I'm just looking here, there might potentially first quarter, certainly.
As an example, I don't know if Michael's on, but I'm going to
family issues. Some of the small lot issues are going to take longer because there's just a lot and complexities with the small lots.
Okay. And yeah, obviously, I've heard a lot about small lots and the, the need to get some sort of certainty on what we're changing as they go out to the market.
That's correct.
Okay. And then the consultant that you're bringing on, is that just specifically for the parking or for all of these?
And Laura may chime in. My understanding, though, it's for multiple topics, not just parking.
Okay.
Yes.
I was
That's
hoping,
correct.
yeah, hope so.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will move on to our miscellaneous section. And I know we have the Havana Business District is in the agenda packet. I don't see any other reports. I know Oil and Gas has a report in our backup. So unless there's any pressing reports from any of our outside partners, speak up now or forever hold your peace. Okay. And I never have a December meeting, never. In all my years being on council, whenever I've been involved in PED. However, it has been brought to my attention that we really, really need a meeting. So Laura, I think it's December 11th at 8:30. We're going to go ahead and have a PED meeting.
Need to add to that, but 11 million.
And thank you. To note, we have Steve and Brandon mentioned earlier, staff have been working very hard on UDO amendments, and we have another set to bring forward to you all. And so December would be fantastic to keep progress and momentum on moving those forward. In addition to that, we want to follow through on Councilmember Sundberg's request to bring Gun Club Road back for a presentation to this group. So that is also on the agenda. And then last is a oil and gas annual update.
Okay, very good. All right, I expect everyone to be in holiday attire for the December meeting. Maybe some hot cocoa. Okay, well, everyone have a great rest of your day. Thank you for being here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.